Eric Carlson, I've got the formal bio here, which really only scratches the surface of each of them, but Eric's a retired as the Dean's Executive Professor of Entrepreneurship in the Levy School of Business and the Director of Miller Center's Accelerator Program. Eric spent 25 years in research, product development, and executive management in Silicon Valley. And during that time, he served as CEO of 2 software companies. And, because that wasn't enough, he served 10 years on the Los Gatos Town Council, including 2 terms as mayor. Thanks for being here, Eric. Yep. Jim, also known as Dr. James Koch, is a professor of organizational analysis and management emeritus and former dean of the Levy School of Business, and also served as acting dean of the School of Engineering. Not in an office quite as nice as this, but and prior to coming to Santa Clara, Jim was the director of organization planning and development at PG&E and a recipient of the American Society for Training and Development Award for Excellence in the Organization Development Professional Practice area. So thank you, Jim, for being here. So I think what we really want to start with is just a little bit about the origin of how what's now Miller Center became a center, and it started in, I guess, late 90s. Do you want to just talk about some of the backstory of?
I'll be relatively brief. So the center was part of the university's strategic plan in the mid-90s and was founded in 1997. I was the founder for the Center for Science, Technology, and Society, and I was just walking past a classroom on my way here and saw one of the members of the initial faculty advisory board teaching, Alex Field, who you may or may not know, but he's a very eminent history of economic historian. We had, in the early days, this was, I would say, an inspiration from Father Paul Locatelli.
They're asking you to speak up. So.
Can you hear okay? Are we doing okay back there? Thank you. Just go like this if you don't hear. So Paul became, he was president, he hired me as dean of the business school in 1990, and then served as president of Santa Clara for 20 plus years, I think it was 21 years, and became the first ever secretary of higher education for all the 150 Jesuit institutions of higher learning in the world when he stepped down as president. Paul was a visionary. Paul was a lovable human being. He could speak to the lowest ranking person on this campus and be on a kind of a first name personal basis with a janitor or with the CEO of any major company in Silicon Valley. People all cared for him. He really exuded with the 3 C's: competence, conscience, and compassion. And all of my contemporaries in the 90s who were really recruited during that period, and I think Eric could speak to this too, were really inspired by Paul's leadership. And part of the strategic plan for the university was to create centers of distinction, of which there would be 3. One would be on Jesuit education, and a second would be on applied ethics. Kirk Hansen was retired a couple years after I did. He's still a very good personal friend. I know Eric's friends with him as well. He was head of the Markkula Center. And then I was asked to head, in 1997, the Center for Science, Technology, and Society. And what was created really is a function of the community here that existed in that time, the collaboration of faculty in that period. With the most eminent people, and whether it was history or economics or computer science, and from the law field, the person who's inspiration behind the technology law program here, Howard Annawalt, was on the advisory board. And it was really a collaborative, interdisciplinary effort that created this concept of put some flesh on the notion of a center focused on science, technology, and society. And Eric, I think you got involved you were employee number 3, and you were free, so that was good. He had a very nominal salary, and at the end of each year, he'd give the money back to me, so which was a really great deal, by the way. But I tended to be more sort of the external person, and more, if you will, oftentimes one might say 50,000 feet. Eric was the guy who could get things done. He was described to me as by a headhunter when he first got involved with us as the best operations executive in the entire Silicon Valley area. And this was a respected person who was as a headhunter. So I think we maybe complemented each other in the kind of the shared vision, and which I helped to kind of put the glue around, if you will, through the faculty connections and with the Silicon Valley community. And Eric was someone who both shared the vision, but also was extraordinary in terms of execution. And a couple of staff members at that time, in particular Cheryl Dale, was extremely, she was just incredibly valuable in everything we did. Cheryl's quite ill right now, but I often chided her, had the aloha spirit. If you Google aloha spirit, and you'll know what Cheryl Dale was about. And everybody who worked with her, both on campus, she could get things done just by dint of her personality and her kindness, as well as all the people who were out there who were working with her across dozens of countries, and the mentors. They all love Cheryl. And Cassandra's staff was her successor, and Cassandra had all the same many of the same capabilities. Each of them are unique individuals, but they were very much a part of it. So I think when I sort of stand back, I guess as part of the origin story, I would attribute, I think that if there were something like a central casting for putting together a play that started out as a blank piece of paper and became what you see here today, I would say central casting did a damn good job. It really, at the end of the day, and in all the ventures you work with, I often said, there's the technology risk, and there's the market risk, and there's the people risk in any venture, for profit or nonprofit. The most important is the people. You can have a B strategy, but if you've got the right people and you create the right kind of culture, you'll figure it out. You'll learn, and I think that's what happened here. Thing is, I want to stop there, but I've got some exhibits. How many of you have ever heard of the Nexus? Yes, I would. Way better. The editor was Eric, and there's a whole series of these here that tell the story, the early days story, the precursors to the Global Social Benefit Incubator, and things that happened around the 150th anniversary of Santa Clara and we say, I don't know if you know this, it's the oldest institution of higher learning in America, in California. But we hosted a major conference in 2001, Technology and Us, a Vision of the Future. And one of these issues is a summary of what happened there. There's also an issue here down in 2004 that had the winners of the Tech Museum Awards. How many have heard of the Tech Museum Awards? A few have. Good. We're on a roll here now. Pretty soon it'll be unanimous. But anyway, in 2004, Andy Lieberman was a winner of the Tech Awards in the Microsoft education category and became a participant in the GSBI as an attendee, as a social entrepreneur. So it's a rich story. And one thing I must say in coming, it's my first time I've been here. I retired in 2018. It's the first, I couldn't find my way here, to be honest. I got in an elevator, only went to the third floor, and I said, oh my God, they've already downsized. But one thing I am impressed by is the windows, because we started out in a space of about 100 square feet in 1997 in the basement of Walsh Administration. We had no windows. And I came in, I stepped in here, and I said, oh my God, windows! So this is awesome. But
yeah, good.
Anyway.
So with that note on back then, 1997, small office, no windows, new center.
My office was a closet before I was my office.
But what more than that though? What was the charter besides this conference and starting the Tech Awards? Do you want to say a bit about what you guys were?
Well, we were sort of searching for a charter, I guess I would say. My involvement started as I sold a company in 1998 to Silicon Graphics, and I decided it was time for me to not be in Silicon Valley anymore. So I was looking for something to do, and my wife said, "You need to get out of the house." So that was my first goal, and I knew a couple of Jim's.
Eric's wife loves me.
And that's why. So, at any rate, I met Jim and I met Kathy Bayard and Cheryl, and it looked like a really good starting thing. And we had an idea about trying to do something to use Silicon Valley ideas, innovation, technology, whatever, to help in unestablished markets, particularly markets that had to do with poor people. And it took us a while to kind of figure things out, but we got the Tech Awards going, and the first thing the Tech Awards people said, you got to teach us how to use the money, because we'll get $50,000 grant, it'll be gone in a year, we'll be back where we were. So you need to teach us how to take the money that we get and turn it into a sustainable, maybe even scalable business plan. And that became part of our charter, which became the GSBI. And the first year, you recruited all the people that came. The next year, Pat Guerra, who was heavily involved, did the admissions process. I noticed he was really working hard trying to help people. We asked him to establish a value proposition, a target market statement, and a business model, income and expense drivers. And he was really working trying to help them. So we came up with, actually Pat came up with the idea. I had been teaching a course in the business school, and he said, why don't you use the students to help with admissions? So beginning in 1995, about 30 MBAs.
2005, wasn't it?
1999.
Right.
Sorry, that was a long time ago.
It was the first class was 2001. Maybe it was
2003 was the first year of
of GSBI. Yeah.
I was doing nothing then. Okay. So after I was doing nothing for 4 years, I had been teaching in the business school, and we took the entrepreneurship class and focused it as a new class, because you could take an independent study course. We took, essentially everybody participated, and that class became the admissions committee for the second actually GSBI. Since then, the process has gotten a little bit more rigorous, and I think the third or fourth year we had 300 applicants, which was like maybe the most we've ever had. And Cheryl and I and Kathy were working pretty hard to help straighten out who came. Since then, I've been amazed at the success of the participants. I don't know whether you should attribute it to us or just to them, but the fact that they came here, it worked for several months, then came here for a couple of weeks, and most of them walked away with a business plan that they could implement. I don't know what the percentage of people who are still around, but it's very high of people who come through this program and whose business is still going on. And before that happened, most quote-unquote nonprofits or social entrepreneurship organizations didn't last very long. And so we have maybe 1,000 alumni, and I bet over 900 are still working, which is really nice. I travel quite a bit in almost every country I go to, particularly in Africa or South America or Southeast Asia. There's an alumni there. So it's really cool for me to go see what our alumni are actually doing and to go to their sites. So that's neat. I guess the other thing I would add is for a while we were kind of going roughing it, but about the third or fourth year we developed this program of what we needed to teach them about a mission statement with a metric and a value proposition and a business model and all those things. And since then it's been a really, I think, well-structured educational program for social entrepreneurs. I'd like to say the best in the world, but I can't prove that. But I think that. I think that. And if you look at some of the people, what they've done, there are now millions of people benefiting from GSBI hosted organizations, and that's pretty impressive to me that there's millions of people who are benefiting from the organizations that have been through this program.
Well, for context, when we were celebrating the 25th anniversary of the center, Karen led a lot of research, and we discovered that, you're saying you had to wing it for a few years. At the time GSBI started, there weren't even really other accelerators in the social space or even in the commercial space. Y Combinator, that's super well known now, didn't start until 2005, right? A couple of years after this. So How did you guys come up with the idea of what's in? I mean, there wasn't really a model for an accelerator. You just
I don't know. It just sort of happened.
And let me just
I think we wrote about it. We ever write about this?
point of reference. This was 2002, and we had just hosted a major conference in the fall of 2001, which was a sesquicentennial conference. It was the 150th anniversary, and in that, this is the issue that Eric edited. And it happened to be, I was looking at this morning on the cover, a fairly handsome young guy by the name of Jeff Skoll, who was in the attendance, and Sally Osberg. And her husband taught for many, many years in the English department. He's a wonderful teacher of English literature. As some of you may know, Skoll Foundation, I think, in a fairly early stage, committed $1 million to the Miller Center, and then subsequently renewed for another $1 million. So they became a kind of a bulwark, if you will, of our operating budget to grow the program. So if you know Silicon Valley, and as our board members did, and I could talk for an hour about the board members, who they were, it's a very networked region, and that's why it's so innovative. You'll sit at a coffee shop and somebody will be talking about they're on their third startup in the next table over, and it's just this kind of really unique place where people are always talking about possibilities, innovation, and it's been amplified by the immigration, particularly from India and China, and ethnic Chinese populations. One of my good friends who's on the advisory board, Carrie Yang, who's an IEEE fellow in computer science, asked me one time, what does IC stand for? And I said, well, of course it stands for integrated circuit. And he said, no, it stands for Indian and Chinese, because if it weren't for the Indians and the Chinese, there would not be a Silicon Valley, So because of our openness, if you will, in terms of immigration, we've really benefited from that. So. But I go back to what Eric was saying, build on that point that, what happens how do you become sustainable? And if you can't become sustainable, it's the proof of the pudding, if you will, that you've got the ability to become a sustainable organization. And I think that was recognized because we were early. We frankly were kind of just figuring it out as we went. That's a pretty powerful value proposition, and those 1,300 ventures in over 100 countries. I'm going to Costa Rica in January, and one in the first class was something called New Millennium Magazine. It's still operating in Costa Rica, and the person who came through the GSBI is still in the same organization. This is.
That's so unusual.
25 years later, but anyway, it's amazing that, the ripple effect, if you will, of the kind of work that's happened here. And I just love the windows that you guys have. We never would have imagined.
So a big theme from the beginning, I think something that really differentiates us as Miller Center has always been the mentoring. I mean, a lot of other programs now have mentoring, but I think from the outset, getting someone like Eric at your caliber to come in and help get the center off the ground. And I know when I came through GSBI, so 2005, so I guess it was the third class as a Guatemalan social entrepreneur, I remember Jeff Miller was a mentor. That's how I first thought of him, and he talked about his experience. He was actually a lecturer also about his experience with the company that he led called Documentum, and took to, I think he said, from
I think another important aspect is the mentors were with these organizations not for just 2 weeks, or it was several months before, and sometimes years afterwards. And that was really unique. It wasn't just come in and get mentored and get out. The mentors stuck with these organizations. I still work with organizations I met in 2004 or 5.
Why do you think it's the attraction? I mean, these are mentors, many of whom, people like yourself, could be doing anything, anywhere. Why do it through
I think once you get involved with with folks, you develop a relationship with the people. And second, you develop a relationship with the success of the organization. So I'm really proud to say that I was working with this organization who's now done so well, even if I had nothing to do with it. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for you. Something you said a long time ago that I use a lot now is that you said being a social entrepreneur is really lonely. And by providing mentors that, it abates that loneliness. When did you first see that? When did that come to you? Because it came to me because of you, and I think I use it all the time.
Oh, that's good.
Really
That's too nice. That's too nice. I think it was Jim's idea. But I remember it was the very first one. We knew this was an important part, and then it would make us difference. And what was amazing was we had way more faculty and people from around that wanted to do it, and it kind of became the thing to do, was to be part of the GSBI. And so we had a lot of really top-notch people volunteer to do this. And even though it took, for 4 or 5 or 6 months ahead of time, several hours a week, and while they were here, it took all day, people liked it. And the fact is, connecting, if you've done something in Silicon Valley, which is one thing, but if you've done something that helps make a difference in the world to hundreds of people, it really is a lot more meaningful. At least it is to me, than having done a company here or taught a course there. To have worked with an organization, I don't know, I'll just pick one is southern Nepal, that helps create water pumps, solar water pumps, that farmers, and there are 1 million farmers now, 1 million farmers in South Nepal using these water pumps. And each family is affected, affects their income, so that's at least 1 million families. When you say that, you can't say that about teaching the course, and you can't say that about running a business most times.
Yeah, one thing we talked about the other day was how long it does take some of these companies to get to their level of scale, and the importance of the long-term relationship, because we've seen, Husk Power Systems is a company that we've known and loved for many years, but they're making it big, but it's taken them a long time to get there. Do you want to just talk about how long?
You know that better than I.
Well, Brad and Vicky were mentors for a decade or more, and he worked with Husk Power and actually became chairman of their board. They started out in India with the reason the Husk Power, it was a biomass generation of energy. And as the cost of solar came down, and Brad headed a venture-backed company in the solar industry, he also co-founded 2 other Silicon Valley public companies. So it gives you a feel for the caliber of his involvement, and Vicky's as well. But they were in the class of 2008. So now fast forward to 12, 14, 15 years. So these are not like overnight wonders. The thing that's remarkable about, and I've got several folks who've been through our programs, either Tech Awards or GSBI, have written books about their work. It's a commitment. Satyan from Drishti, do you remember? Drishti was in the class of 2006. He showed up in my house in Pleasanton in November. And he's, Drishti, if you Google Drishti, is still an operating venture in India, and it's reached out across many, many villages. And he wants to start a new venture called with a name called Happiness is in the Name, but it's basically focused on the concept that he developed and has spread throughout villages in India of the power of collectives. If you think of Gandhiism, if you have some sort of aspects of this notion of self-reliance and village level organization and trust-based markets, he would like to take that concept and asked me to go on his board to begin thinking about this whole notion of collectives, collective action, grassroots collective action as a mechanism for social change. And an organization that I find attractive in that regard is Braver Angels. You may want to Google Braver Angels and what they're up to in terms of our own issues, in terms of divisiveness in our own country. Anyway, husk power of the question, this is a long slog. It's not an easy process. And
I think it's also, if you think about it, these markets are not well defined to start with, and the customers often are far apart and not close to a technology center. So reaching the market is a really big effort. So you may have a good idea, but how are you going to get the product to the people or the service to the people? It's not a trivial question at all. And if you want to start a company in Silicon Valley, if you've got a decent idea, the market's right there. You don't go anywhere. But if you have an idea for a water pump in Nepal, you have to figure out, besides having a good water pump, how you're going to get it to people in South Nepal. And that's a challenge. So the markets take a while to figure out, and they take a long time to reach a sustaining number of customers. So you really have to believe in it, and you have to be willing to invest in it too.
So to help entrepreneurs with all these extra challenges, I mean, starting a business is always hard, and then you've got all the extra challenges that you just described, Eric. And you said in the early years of the program, you basically pulled in some of your MBA or business school curriculum and some mentors who knew Silicon Valley businesses. But I know over time the curriculum evolved into something much more focused on the social entrepreneurs, which then evolved into your book, the book that you two.
That's true too.
Say a bit about how kind of the curriculum evolved and about.
Well, I don't know. I think Jim gets credit because I was talking to, I remember one day, and he said, "Why don't you teach a course on this?" And I had to, okay, what will we put in this course?
why don't you do the work?
Yeah. And so Pat Guerra and I sat down and we sort of outlined what the course would be, and that outline of the course became basically the outline for the GSBI program. It was a little bit more academic, but the basic elements of the finding a business plan made up that course, and that's what they would do. In fact, the first course we started, each student took an organization from the GSBI and did a business plan for them and with them, and that turned out to be a great experience for us all.
Some of you may know, but many may not know. My name is Jitendra, and I did my MBA at Sanjana, and I took Eric Carlson's course. That was one of the most inspiring courses I've done. And as he pointed out, each one of the students, it was a small class of about 8 or 10 students, and Cassandra was my classmate in that batch. And the startup that I was associated with was Nishant Bioenergy. And so I helped to write the business plan, the financial statement. And till today, we are still in touch. It is still thriving. It is still going on. All credit to you, Eric. It was fabulous. Very inspiring.
It's a great story of connections and things. So yeah, we're happy to take other questions from folks about for Jim and Eric. Karen.
So, at my time with Miller Center, I'm very familiar with how many of the SOCENTs are aligned with SDGs like energy access, clean water. But I'm curious, when you watch the news or you scroll through your news feeds, what sort of social concerns that you see, whether it's gun violence, mental health, are you contemplating how this model that are here at Miller Center could maybe benefit, or maybe could there be a specialty cohort focused on some of these really big issues that we're facing today that maybe Miller Center hasn't looked at?
Give that a thought. Answer that while I think about it.
You coward.
Yes.
Well, I have 2 board meetings later today. One is for Catholic Charities Silicon Valley, and I'm on the strategic planning subcommittee with the former CEO of Agilent here in Silicon Valley. And the mission we have set for the organization is about a $42 million annual budget It's, I think, the largest organization in Silicon Valley serving the poor, is to disrupt poverty. And the theory of change is through through a process that's informed by trauma and centered around the family as a system, and also involving integrated delivery of services, orchestration. Because there are over 40 silos in Catholic charities, 40 silos. But if you're really kind of meeting the client where they are, it's informed, the work is informed by trauma and centered around the family as a system, and centered around permanently bringing people out of poverty in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley has the highest poverty rate when you adjust for cost of living in America. It also has the most billionaires in America. So the way I think my work there in the strategic planning process is informed in that way. The other board is the Interfaith Housing Board, which is later tonight. And I'm on the finance committee, and our cost of insurance went up by 19% this year because of global climate change and the additional cost to insure the housing projects that we have. And I also was reviewing the insurance night before last proposal is we need to have insurance for terrorism in Livermore. So climate change and terrorism, and one place I shop in Pleasanton is Home Depot. And last week somebody was shot and killed there where we shop. And I'm in my neighborhood on a neighborhood watch committee because we have home break-ins. And this, by the way, is a very expensive gated community. So none of us are insulated from these challenges. And the work of Miller Centers really shapes my thinking about all these things. And I'm so glad to see there's some kind of student activism here now on climate change on campus.
I think a really important thing that Jim said, that he said to me for several years before I figured out what the hell he was talking about, was, what's your theory of change? It sounds at a very high level, but what it really means is, how are you going to make things better? What are you going to do to make things better? And I think in the areas where you can more precisely describe that, the better chance you have. I mean, we've had really good success, if you look at it, in alternative energy, because there are some specific technologies you can employ, and it makes it better quickly. I mean, you can put a village system together fairly quickly for not much money, actually. Or you can put an individual household system together for almost no money now to give them energy. And you have a theory of change that having energy will make things better. And it's really a good theory. It's really hard to do anything if you don't have power. So that kind of thing, and I think if you look at energy, if you look at communications, how people talk to each other, how they interchange, there's always some kind of, not always, but most times there is some sort of specific technology you can employ that will make things better. And that always to me is, when I look at an organization, if they figured out what they're going to do to make things better, if they figured out some method to make that change happen. And I think we've been among the best at the center for helping organizations figure that out. And this guy gets the credit for it because he kept saying, what's your theory of change? I had no idea what he was talking about for a while. But
sometimes I didn't either.
yeah, but you said it. I had to figure out what it meant. So I think that differentiates us and our customer here, is that they're looking to make a difference in the world that they're in, and we're looking to help them do that. And it's not like we're steady and then we're trying to help them. That makes a huge difference if that's what your motivation is.
I want to put in a plug for mentoring. How many of you have had a mentor that really helped shape? How many of you had more than one mentor? I've had lots of mentors. I've not had a mentor. I've had lots of mentors. The first chairman of the board for Center for Science, Technology, and Society was Regis McKenna He's in the Silicon Valley Hall of Fame. Here he is with Steve Jobs when he was advising Steve Jobs on how to create a market for something called a personal computer. And at that time, he knew Steve Jobs. Steve didn't wear shoes when he'd go venture capitalist. He's in the Silicon Valley Hall of Fame. This is an in-depth interview with him and sort of lessons learned. He was the chairman of our advisory board for 10 years. The norm at most places would be 2 years, maybe 3. And I still hear from him. We used to have he would call these no agenda lunches, where we would meet and with no agenda have lunch for 3 hours, just talking about things, ideas, issues in our world. Here's another person who would be a great mentor. She was just appointed as, it's a great book, by the way, president of Columbia University. She's an economist, an international economist. And she's saying basically in the way a lot of these collective action problems, but there are things we know. We're not as stupid as would appear to be the case with how we operate today. Another person is the chancellor of the University of Texas, former Admiral William McRaven. William McRaven has a great book out called The Wisdom of the Bullfrog. He was the person who oversaw the action which killed Osama bin Laden. He's a Green Beret, a SEAL. He was in special operations. But I think having mentors is so valuable, and some of it's reading history. Poor Richard's Almanac, for example. You want to understand the point of view of somebody who's striving to get a better life, read Poor Richard's Almanac. Another person who was a mentor for me was John Gardner. He was the founder of Common Cause. And I spent a year with him before I started the center, helping to develop, and we did papers in American Sociological Society on the construct of community, building a sense of community. John always talked about it. We said, how could we measure it? Well, we worked out at American Research Institute a way to measure sense of community. Shared vision, shared purpose, respect, caring, incorporation of diversity, communication, all things that are just sort of fundamental of blocking and tackling. So
That's cool.
I'm a big advocate of mentors. And I really encourage you to read widely, take notes from people who have sort of had the lived experience of trying to do things that are intended to make the world a better place.
This has been great. I think we all took a lot of notes from your experiences and everything both of you have been sharing. As we're winding down here, any last questions from the audience? Yeah, Jeff.
I'm wondering, based on the organizations you've worked with, what are some of the most compelling business models or technologies that you've seen have an impact on the second crisis?
Whoa.
Can we take that offline? That's a standard reaction. No, you
Go ahead.
The basic thing is it's a business model is revenues and expenses. And it's great to have a positive cash flow. And it's great if your unit economics improve over as you get bigger. You guys are doing great stuff on that. I know that I would go to this guy. Why pick on us?
I remember when I finally figured out when I was working how key a business model was. To really understand where you're going to get money and how you're going to spend money. And it's kind of obvious in a for-profit company, but most so-called nonprofits that I've dealt with don't think about that. How am I going to, if I want to make a difference, how am I going to get the money to do it, and how am I going to spend the money to do it? And I think that's fundamental to any business is understanding And that's really the business model. I also think we were very good at trying to help people identify the customer. Who is it you're trying to help? Because it's sometimes easy to get either overcommitted or confused in the world of social entrepreneurship of who's the customer. And often the customer isn't where the money comes from. And that's really different from the for-profit world, is you're going to get the money from here and use it to help over here. And that's a real different model of income and expenses. You're going to get money from this and money over here. So you have two sets of people, three sets kind of your own people that you're trying to help. And that's, in terms of managing it, that makes it more challenging.
I remember I was on a public board when Google went private or went public. And around the board table, I was saying, what is this valuation? Day two, they're valued higher than General Motors. And so what's this business model about? And the sense was that, well, shareholders are paying for time. Google has a model for monetizing eyeballs. In a sense, isn't that what Facebook and all these outfits are trying to, they create these addictive business models to monetize time on screens, which probably isn't a healthy thing. That's a class, not a seminar.
So this has been great. I think one of the takeaways, reflecting on everything you've said, and is really social entrepreneurship is not that different than regular entrepreneurship, except it's harder. And of course, it's harder and it's more impactful, but the underlying principles are basically similar. You need, theory of change, your value proposition, know your customers, find a business model that works, and find mentors to help you figure it all out, because it's hard. I can recommend to everybody the book, Building a Social Venture. I think we have copies around here. Is a lot of your lessons are there, and I can just say on behalf of Miller Center, you two and Pat and Al and Cheryl and everybody set a really high bar for the work, for the relationships with entrepreneurs and mentors, and I think all of us who have been trying to carry on the legacy for all these years, we're trying to every day as things grow, trying to live up to the expectations that not only you personally, but everybody who was involved in the center early on set a very high bar, and we're trying to do our best to keep it going forward and do our part to help the world. So on behalf of the center, just thank you both so much for creating the momentum in this tidal wave that's we're trying to.
Well, thank you guys to being part of it. I didn't have more fun any place in my career than I had while I was working on this. It is the most fun thing I did. So enjoy it, because it makes a huge difference. These companies can make a huge difference in the world. And it's something you can't do at least I couldn't do on my own. But through these organizations, I was able to see quite a bit of change happen. And stick with it. It's a great opportunity that doesn't exist in many places.
Thank you.
Thank you.